Mohamed Naguib, the first president of Egypt, serving from the Declaration of the Republic on 18th of June 1953 to 14th of November 1954. He was the primary leader of the Egyptian Revolution of 1952, which ended the rule of the Muhammad Ali dynasty in Egypt and Sudan. Naguib's full name was Mohamed Naguib Yusuf Qutb al-Qashlan. He was born on 19th of February in Khartoum, Sudan, which was an Egyptian province at the time. He was the eldest of 3 sons in a family of 9 children of an Egyptian, Yusuf Naguib, and Zohra Ahmad Othman. His family name al-Qashlan was popular in Egypt at that time due to well-known scientific personalities such as Saad al-Qashlan and Abdul Samad al-Qashlan. Naguib came from a long line of army officers. His father served in the Egyptian army in Sudan as a district commissioner. He always wanted Muhammad to be a teacher or a lawyer. Nevertheless, the son Mohamed Naguib ran away and got himself accepted at the Royal Military Academy in Cairo. With the country under the domination of Britain under a protectorate that began at the outset of World War I, he rose in the army and took degrees in law and political economy. As a result, Naguib first studied to become a translator and later in his life earned a law degree, a Master of Arts degree, MA in political science, and another MA in civil law. He never completed his doctorate because his career in the army by then had begun to take off. Naguib found the time to polish his language skills, learning English, French, Italian, and German. He also began to study the revived Hebrew language in the 1950s, and soon after the July bloodless coup, he ordered that Hebrew be taught at military college and at Cairo and Alexandria universities, realizing that the Egyptian army had been handicapped during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War by the fact that very few soldiers could interpret Israeli military communications. Naguib worked as a guard in Cairo. By 1931, he was ready to resign from the army, but as a result of an unexpected promotion, he decided to turn his attention to his military career once again. In 1934, he was transferred to the Egyptian Coast Guard, where he was employed to chase smugglers across the Sinai Desert, mixing with the Bedouin and helping treat their illnesses. In 1940, he was again promoted, however, despite generally favorable relations between Naguib and King Farouk. Naguib refused to kiss the king's hand. A brisk handshake was the best Naguib could offer. On February 4, 1942, after a standoff at Abdin Palace during World War II in Cairo between the British and the King, and in protest at Farouk's concessions to the British, allowing them to choose the Egyptian Prime Minister, Naguib sent in his resignation saying, "Since the army was not called upon to defend your Majesty, I am ashamed to wear this uniform and ask your permission to resign." On this occasion, Farouk turned down Naguib's resignation. He again attempted to resign in 1951 when Hussein Siri Aimer, widely thought to be corrupt, was made head of the Coast Guard, but again the resignation was refused. In 1948, he saw his first combat as leader of a machine gun and infantry regiment when Egypt opened its campaign against Israel. He was said by fellow officers to have opposed the unilateral Egyptian move against Israel because he regarded the army as unequipped to fight successfully. Meanwhile, Naguib had continued to climb the military ladder, serving in Palestine during the First Arab-Israeli War in the British-mandated Palestine as chief commander of the Arab armies in Palestine. Naguib is the one and only Egyptian army officer to receive the military honor star twice. Wounded 3 times and left for dead on the battlefield, Naguib was hailed as a hero after the war. Because of the defeat of the Arab armies in the Palestine War, his belief that King Farouk should be removed was strengthened, so he joined Gamal Abdel Nasser and other junior army officers in a movement later known as the Free Officers. In 1949, Naguib secretly joined the Free Officers movement, and a year later he was promoted to the rank of Major General. General Naguib is one of Egypt's few heroes from the war in Palestine and enjoyed wide respect in the country, while the rest of the Free Officers, led by Gamal Abdel Nasser, were young junior members of the military and all from peasant or lower middle class backgrounds. Knowing that officers in that young age would not be taken seriously, they asked General Naguib to assume leadership of the movement. While this proved successful in strengthening the Free Officers, later it caused great friction between Naguib and Nasser. Despite his disapproval of his fellow military top brass, Naguib remained in the army in order for the Free Officers not to lose their highest-ranking officer and most influential member, unlike what many argue, that his position on the top was merely a figurehead leader to the revolutionary Free Officers movement to lend credibility to the group. Finally, on 6th of January 1952, Naguib won the elections at the Army Officers Club, almost a revolutionary step in itself, since ordinarily the king's appointees held the executive roles in the club. However, the Free Officers' increasing influence in the army, together with Naguib's reputation, resulted in the defeat of the king's nominees and Naguib won with a landslide victory. King Farouk was thinking of removing Naguib from his post when Egypt was thrown into turmoil following the 26th of January Cairo fires. Meanwhile, the rope was beginning to tighten around the three officers and investigations were being carried out to uncover dissidents in the army. The executive committee of the Officers' Club was dissolved and the three officers brought their plans for a revolution 3 years forward, taking power in July 1952. On 23rd of July 1952, the three officers commenced the Egyptian Revolution of 1952 with a coup d'etat to depose King Farouk. Naguib was appointed first as Commander-in-Chief of Army in order to keep the armed forces firmly behind the junior officers' coup. Naguib was at the forefront of the Free Officers movement, lending it legitimacy in the eyes of the people, the army, politicians, and foreign powers. Within 24 hours of the beginning of the revolution, the newly formed Revolution Command Council, RCC, had asserted the movement's peaceful intentions with Naguib as its leader. Naguib was a familiar name at the time, unlike those of the other three officers who were too young and too junior in rank to have made a name for themselves. On 24th of July, Naguib met former Prime Minister Ali Meher to ask him to form a government and communicate the revolutionaries' demands to the king at that time in Alexandria. On the 25th of July, Naguib led a group of RCC members to Alexandria to supervise the ousting of the king, the RCC at the time being divided over what Farouk's fate should be. Some wanted him to be put on trial, while others wanted him to abdicate and be sent into exile. Naguib supported exile, and after a vote, it was agreed that Farouk should abdicate in favor of his infant son Ahmed Fuad, who became King Fuad II and should then be exiled. On the 26th of July, Naguib arrived to say his farewells to the former king, arriving late and catching up with Farouk by boat, a few minutes after Farouk had set sail. After an awkward silence on the deck of the Royal Yacht Al Mahrousa, Naguib reminded Farouk that until the 1942 standoff with the British, the army had been loyal to the monarchy, but things had changed since then. Naguib said, "Sir, we were forced to do what we did," to which Farouk replied, "Yes, I know, your mission is a difficult one. As you know, governing Egypt is not an easy task." Naguib later stated, "I could not feel joy for his defeat."